I bought a new camera. Now, if you've been watching this channel, I have been talking about my Nikon D750 and how it's such a great camera, and I've been using it for years and I really don't need to upgrade, which is true. But I went ahead and bought the Nikon Z5 anyway. And I'm going to talk about why I did that in this video, and then I'm going to give you some comparisons between the two cameras, or just a DSLR to a mirrorless camera in general. My name's Bill, and if you're new to the channel, we do gear reviews here and photography tutorials, and sometimes we take you on little trips that we go on. The other half of this channel is Eric Weber, and we alternate videos, and sometimes we make them together. In fact, next week we're going to have a video about our trip down to North Carolina where we went down to photograph waterfalls. So look out for that one. But today I'm going to be talking about my new camera. So this is the Nikon Z5. It's a mirrorless camera. It's got a 24 megapixel sensor. It's going to be familiar to you if you've used a Nikon DSLR before, but there are some differences and some things that I'm not loving about it so far, but I've only had it for a day. So there's definitely going to be a little bit of a learning curve with this camera. So first of all, why would I get a new camera? My D750 was fine. I never wanted for any more resolution than the 24 megapixel sensor had. I'm going to throw up some images here that I've taken over the years with this camera, and when you zoom in tight, you can just see that the resolution's fine. I'm not making wall-size posters with this camera. This was a good camera. I like it a lot. It feels good in my hand. It feels comfortable. It's served me perfectly for the last 5 or 6 years. As soon as it came out, I bought it, and I've been using it ever since, and I really love the camera. So when Nikon came out with the Z5, I was looking at it because the Z6 and the Z7, while they're great cameras, they only had one memory card slot, which was something that I was, always wanting. I shoot, sometimes professionally, and I want to have a backup in my camera. I just do. And for some reason, they didn't do it with the Z6 and 7. Instead, they put the more expensive QXD cards inside it, and they could only fit one. But here with the Z5, we have 2 memory card slots, just, straight up old memory cards, which is perfect for me. The SD cards that we've been using for years and years. So that's what I was looking for. So all of a sudden, this camera, I'm like, wow, okay, so that's something that I really like about it. The other thing that I like about it is it has in-body stabilization. Now, some of my lenses, in fact, most of my lenses have stabilization in them. But, every now and then you'll get a prime lens, or there'll be a lens that doesn't have it. In fact, my 28-70 Nikon lens that I've been using for years and years doesn't have stabilization. So with this camera, I will have stabilization. Now, there's one issue with that. If you use the lenses that are made for this camera, the Z-mount lenses, those will give you you'll get a 5-axis, in-body stabilization. For some reason, when you add older F-mount lenses, it's a 3-point stabilization system for some reason. So it's not as good, but it's still better than nothing if you have no stabilization in your lens. So this is something that I thought was great. I really like having a touchscreen on the back of the camera. Now, I didn't know that until I started using the Canon M50, which is what I'm shooting on here. And it's very intuitive, and I love having the controls right on the back of the camera. You can touch to focus, you can adjust all your settings right from the back of the camera. Now, with the limited amount of time that I've used the Z5, I can tell you right now I prefer Canon's menu system and touchscreen on the back of the camera. The Nikon's is good, but I just prefer the way the layout is on a Canon camera. So how do they compare size-wise? I took some still images of the two cameras together, and as you can see as we look at these different images, the Z5 is actually, I think it has a deeper grip than the D750. The body is shorter, it's a little narrower, it's not as deep, the mount is much bigger. So if you look at this, I mean, look at the mount size difference. It's a big difference. Smaller camera, bigger mount. It's a huge mount, But it's a smaller mirrorless camera. So you say, oh, great, it's smaller. Well, not really. This camera feels great in my hand. Now, because I don't have any of the native lenses, I have to use an Ftz adapter. So let's put that on. Okay, here it is with the Ftz adapter. It almost looks like there's a small lens on there. Now, let's take my go-to lens, a 24-70 f2.8. Now that is a pretty big setup. So this whole part right here is all adapter. Now, and when you hold the camera in your hand like this, it's lens heavy. You know, it feels like it wants to dip forward. So it feels unbalanced. If I take the same lens, put it on the D750, it just feels better in my hand. It's a smaller setup and it doesn't feel as heavy. The body's bigger and can support it. So that's something you have to consider. Now, if you plan on buying the lenses that are made for the Z5, you're not going to have that issue. And the lenses will probably be more balanced on here. They're probably smaller than the F-mount lenses. I don't have any of them. I haven't used any of them, so I don't know. But I'm guessing they will be. The other issue is with the new lenses for here, they're pretty expensive. If I wanted to get the equivalent lenses that I have, let's say the 16 to 35 and then, you know, a 24 to 70 and then a 70 to 200, you know, that like holy trinity of lenses, it's going to cost me $7,000–8,000. So for the time being, I'm going to be using this adapter. And maybe the first lens I was looking at that I might want to get that's a native mount to this is the 35mm 1.8. But that's still a $700 lens. But I do like the touchscreen and I do like the feel of the camera. It's got a deep grip. The controls are laid out very nicely. I like that they put the ISO button right here on the top of the camera instead of on the back left side where it used to be on the DSLRs, so that I really like. And everything is pretty assignable. So you still have the function buttons here, the 2 function buttons that you can assign whatever you want. You know, pretty much the whole camera body is customizable. And then on the back of the camera, on the screen, there's an I menu where you can assign different functions to, you know, whatever you want pretty much, and pull that up very quickly. There's a button, a dedicated button on the back of the camera. And so if you have settings that you want to adjust, maybe you want to adjust your focus area, and they're all, you know, able to be customized. So it's great. Whatever settings you use most can be on that menu and you can quickly get to them with the touch screen. So that I really do like. Now, I did a little test just because I wanted to see, you know, if there was a big difference in the actual sensors. Both of these cameras here have a 24 megapixel sensor. So my D750 has a Nikon X-Speed 4 processor, and the Z5 has a Nikon X-Speed 6 processor. This is the same processor that's in the Z6. Now, it's not exactly the same because it doesn't have the same functionality as the Z6, so I'm not really sure what they did, if it's just, you know, updates and things like that, but this doesn't have the same frame rate for shooting. This shoots 4.5 frames per second, where the D6 can actually shoot 12, and that's a function of the processor, so I'm not really sure why it's been, you know, kind of held back there, or if it's just, maybe it's a little bit different. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. But the X-Speed 6 is supposed to be better in low light. So there were a few reasons that made me switch, and these are things you may want to consider if you're going for, you know, a camera at this point. The first thing is, when I bought my D750, it was $2,300 when it first came out. The Z5, you know, at the time of its introduction is $1,299. So it's half the price of what I paid. And I'm getting more camera for that same amount of money. It's weather sealed, just like my D750. The body feels sturdy, it feels good in my hand. So physically, you know, just the fact that it's a little bit smaller. But the price point was a big deal. It has the 2 memory card slots like I spoke about before. Now, what type of photography you're doing? I've been doing a lot of landscape photography and things like that. And my D750 is perfectly fine for that. Working off a tripod or shooting at night, doesn't matter. I'm fine. I'm shooting at ISO 100, so I don't worry about noise or any of that. It's fine. It autofocuses well. I just don't have any issues with it with that. I've started doing some work for some local restaurants where I've been photographing their menu items and doing some interior photography for them, for their social media and website and things like that. And I'm finding myself in dark environments, and I'm wanting cleaner ISO. So I'm hoping that this camera is going to help me out in that situation, because some of the shots are handheld and I'm not using any external lighting. It's all natural light that I'm using. The restaurant, it's a very fast-moving situation, and I only have a few minutes with the food as they're cooking and doing things. So I have to move quickly. I can't take up a lot of space with gear. The actual interior shots, I can set up a tripod. I can do whatever I want. But the actual food images, they're handheld, and I've been using the auto ISO function on my D750 so I can make sure that my shutter speed and my aperture are right where I want them, and then the camera fires off exactly what I need, and I just have to deal with whatever noise is there. The Z5 is supposed to be better in low light, so this is a situation where, for me personally, I felt that this upgrade might be worth it. Plus, it has in-body stabilization, so that, in theory, should also let me to shoot at a cleaner ISO and at a lower shutter speed, and still get the same, you know, sharpness in my images. So I did a little test. I don't know if you can see it over my shoulder here. There's a little camper I have up here on the shelf. It's pretty dark in the room that I'm in. And I went through with the D750 first. I took shots at ISO 100, 1000, 3200, 6000, and then 12,800. And I'm showing you them now, and progressively as we go, you know, through, you get more noise in the image. And then I did the exact same thing with the Z5. Except with the Z5, I took one more shot because the native ISO stops at, I believe, 51,000 or 52,000. So that's where that last shot is there. That is 52,000 ISO, and it's noisy. But is the difference that great? I don't know. When I look at these images, maybe a little. I don't know if it's going to make a huge difference. So this is something that I'm going to actually have to use it in those situations and see. Sometimes a test it's hard to tell, you know, when you're comparing images. I use the exact same lens, the exact same settings, at the exact same time. I took these images one right after the other. That's why when you're nitpicking with cameras, sometimes you can barely see the difference in these cameras. You know, they're all so good at this point. But, you know, my camera's old, and I thought it was time for an upgrade. I also did a little video test. Now, some of you may be doing video, and it might be a huge part of what you do, and others may be still photographers, and you could care less that there's even a video function in the camera. And with my D750, that's pretty much the way I operated. To me, it was a stills camera. The autofocus was terrible, so I didn't use it. The Canon M50 has been perfect for me. I don't want for anything with video. It's perfect for what I'm doing here. And even if I want to walk around and vlog, it's really great. The autofocus is always spot on. So now the Z5 is supposed to have very good autofocus also. Now I couldn't see what I was doing, so I put the camera on the tripod and I hit record, and this is what happened. Okay, so this is a little video test. I have the camera set up here on the tripod. So I have the Z5 with a Nikon 16-35 f4 lens. Now I would prefer to shoot with a wider aperture here, kind of blur out the background a little bit more, but this is what I have. I can't see anything, and that's one of the problems with Nikon and their, you know, video cameras if you're trying to do any kind of vlogging or anything like that. Now I'm set at 24 millimeters. I'm hoping I'm in the frame. I think I am. And the autofocus, that's really what I was concerned about, because the autofocus on my Canon is great. You know, on this camera, I'm hoping it's good also, but I'm not sure. And there's no way to tell. I can't really tell. So hopefully I'm staying in focus. Now this camera has face detect when you're shooting in video, and it has eye detect when you're actually shooting stills. And it also has eye detect for animals, a separate setting. So when you're using video mode like I am here, I'm assuming that it's following my face around and tracking it. Now, there is a workaround to not being able to see myself. I found online, my friend Guy sent me a video of a photographer in Europe who was using an attachment that goes into the hot shoe on this camera, and it's actually just a little reflector. So you tilt the screen out on the back of the camera, and it actually shows you a projected view of that on top of the camera, so you can at least see your framing and things like that. So that I ordered, and it's on its way here, and I'll talk about that when I get it. So that's the video test. Hopefully it looks okay. I'm gonna check it out now. Now I looked at that footage afterwards, and to me it looks like I'm out of focus at the beginning, but once I started moving around, the camera picked me up and then it locked on and focus was good. So going forward, I would, you know, maybe need to, like that device that I said I'm going to be getting, that's gonna help me just to get myself situated and started. And then I think once the video gets going, the camera will, you know, do what it needs to do. But I actually like the quality of the video. That was shot in 1080p at 50 frames per second. So that's pretty much what I'm shooting at here on the M50, and I think the image looks pretty good. It's a good lens that I'm using. That was my Nikon 16-35. So if video is important to you, now the 4K function, it gets cropped. There's a huge crop. So if you're looking to shoot in 4K and you're a Nikon mirrorless user, or you want to buy a Nikon mirrorless, the Z6 is definitely a better option because it doesn't crop the image. So you get the full sensor. This one, for some reason, the sensor, they decided to crop it down to 1.7, which is a really big crop. So you just have to, use a really wide lens so that you can, be in frame, or you have to set yourself back from the camera so that you can get yourself in frame if you don't have a lens that's really wide. Just something to think about. But for my purposes, what I shot in that video is how I'd probably use it most of the time, and it seems to be fine. But again, this is my first impressions of it, so we'll see how that goes. Over the next couple of weeks, Eric and I are going to take our new cameras. He just got the new Canon R5, which to me is the nicest camera on the market right now, the nicest mirrorless camera. It's an expensive camera. It's about $3,500, but it really does everything you could want, I think. If you're a photographer, video, whatever you're into, it does all of it. Whereas this as a entry-level Nikon mirrorless. And we're going to go maybe take a trip to one of our favorite spots in Brooklyn and shoot the city skyline and shoot around that area. That an area never disappoints. It's great for checking out resolution and autofocus, and we just like going to that part of Brooklyn, and we get that great view of the Manhattan skyline, and it really produces some amazing images. Plus it lets us compare the images that we've been taking over years in the same spot with different cameras. So look out for that video, because that's going to be the real test when we get out there and start using it. And probably by the time I make another video, I will have used this in a professional setting, in the low light situation that I was talking about. And I'll also be able to give you some information on that. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. If there's any little tips you have for me with the Z5 or the Z line of cameras, please let me know. I'm still messing around in the menus there, trying to figure everything out. And it's a little bit different. But I'm liking the camera so far. Okay, I'll see you in the next video.